And greetings, greetings. Yes, this is Mother Mary coming to you as a representative of the priestess line, the training of the females of Earth in the arts of divine and sacred practice. And we would like to frame up the sharing of the written transmission, which this conduit will share with you in a few moments. We would like to draw your attention to the great expanse of what you would call time in your realm. Your Earth Gaia, and your human experience has gone on for long millennia. And even before that, long, long, long. And simultaneously, in ultimate reality, there is only now, there is only here. However, within the dream of your experience of Earth, there have been many iterations of an experience of what you would call the human condition, from very etheric beings in what you might remember as Lemuria, or other times and spaces that you have no knowledge or memory of. As well as the Atlantean period, as well as bridge eras, the Egyptian, the ancient pre-dynastic Egyptian era, the dynastic Egyptian era, and as well as the era in which I live, which is the beginning of your contemporary era now. And so throughout what you experience as time and the different iterations of the human experience, from very etheric to extremely dense, what you would also know of as the yugas, or the cycles of time, the role of what you call priestess has varied dramatically. So we cannot point to a past time and say, once upon a time in the temples long ago, priestesses were X, Y, or Z, and they did A, B, and C. This would be a misconstruing of a broad spectrum of ways in which the feminine embodied wisdom streams of the divine. And so we want to contextualize the message we brought forward through this conduit as a written transmission earlier this morning, with that point first. We would also like to draw your attention to the concept of archetypes, and what we would say is the archetypal cycles of time. So many of you may be familiar with the idea of yugas. This comes from the ancient Vedic tradition, or the ancient Hindus, who knew and understood the cycles of time that relate to movements of your planet, movements of your planet and your solar system through the galaxy, movements of other planetary bodies, and cycles of evolution that go from what you call a golden age to a deep iron age, from which you are now emerging as a planetary sphere. So within the realm where you each were born in this time space, in this particular incarnation, you have archetypes which associate and correlate with what, to use, we as higher beings, when we channel through a being, we use their language, we use we draw from their landscape within their vocabulary. What this one refers to as dominator culture. So you have within your realm archetypes primarily correlated with dominator culture, both female and male archetypes and other in-betweens. But these are very limited in scope, and there are other archetypes which had been, we could say, removed from your lexicon. We could say slowly dissolved over time. We could say forgotten in the annals of history. But some of them are emerging, and part of the awakening of the goddess movement, the priestess movement on your planet, is literally for the females and those who identify with the priestess to remember and reclaim some of these archetypes for the foundational consciousness networks within your awareness to rise into a new way of being, to to become more aware of your greater multidimensional self. So let us refer, for example, to the archetype of the mother. That is an archetype that does not go away. It has been changed and manipulated over time, and in dominator culture, it has been denigrated, yes, but the mother archetype is an eternal one that you experience in your realm. However, there had been a great effort in your more contemporary history to remove the archetype of the midwife, or to reduce it as simply a medical function of assisting the mother in birthing the child. But that is a more expansive archetype, and it is returning both in the physical realm as literal midwives who help mothers birth their children in a natural way, to those who midwife those passing from this realm, to those who midwife and birth new creations, to those who support the birthing of a new consciousness on earth. There is also the archetype of the oracle. Consider the Oracle of Delphi. Again, this is one of the archetypes that had been fading from your consciousness, and yet it was not entirely erased. That archetype is again returning because it is a necessary role and function for a healthy, functioning society. To have those who have more capacity to be in oracular states. Now, there is a time, there will be a cycle of time in the golden age where individual oracles are not as required because all will be more connected. But particularly during the transition periods, oracles are necessary support. Now, those become, again, sort of degraded, if you will, over the course of time as a golden age descends, a human family consciousness descends in consciousness down through the cycles into the Iron Age. And so you can consider your Oracle of Delphi as one of the last vestiges before the complete drop into the Iron Age, where there was by the end a misuse of power by the priests who were controlling the oracular circumstances of those females. They were used and, as this one would say, ridden hard and put away wet, to use a cowboy phrase with referral to horse. They were used as workhorses by the end. You can also consider the priestesses who held the sacred flame, those of the, again, Greek times, who were um, required to and really enforced into deep states of limitation in order to be the what you call the Vestal Virgins. These are distorted and very much reduced archetypes of the priestess within a greater context of a dominator culture that uh, dismisses and denigrates the role of the feminine. Before a time when God itself was dismissed as a non-necessary, when people still worship the gods and recognize the power of the feminine as oracle, those in charge in the dominator model could not simply immediately wipe away roles of the feminine, such as midwife, oracle, etc. And so they slowly made headway into control, limitation, contraction, etc. So we would now like to point your attention to times before what your current consciousness may remember, except in inklings and in dreams, where there was a more expansive state of those who served what we would call the field, love, light, intelligence, what you might call God, in and serve their community as those holders of the field. And again, the roles at that time were different, were more expansive, more free, and would not look to you like an idea of, let's say, priestesses in a temple who simply lived in a more liberated way than, let's say, cloistered nuns. This would be circumstances akin to temple training for children, boys and girls, who showed an inclination and a capacity to to connect consciously with what we would call the field. And so we want to now invite you to just take a breath and allow this sort of frame up information to just filter into your consciousness. You need not grasp the memory of each word. Just feel the way there is a spectrum over the course of what you experience as time, of the role of the priestess, the experience of the priestess, and the function of a temple. And as you take a breath, just allow yourself now to come into or remain in a state of receptivity as this one reads the transmission. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful for you all. So I'm going to read now what came today. I want to put a little more light on my book here, my journal. Okay, so again, some of this started dropping in when I was in bed at like 2 in the morning. Got up to pee, and it was one of those, here comes the download. So I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, okay, that's great. I got the concepts. Give me the full specifics when I am ready to get up and write. So the question I began, what were the ancient priestesses about? What did priestesses do? How did they serve prior to dominator culture? So then here comes the transmission, which I then will find out later is Mother Mary. Priestesses were not necessarily cloistered away from men or society. Different times and places were different. Energy mastery may be the closest descriptive of what priestesses and priests were about. The concept, now this really gives me chills still, the concept of the Jedi is an imperfect but partial approximation. Your Jedi character or archetype is primarily one who does battle and fights evil, as you know the Jedi today. But if you were to strip away the constructs of a warring civilization, what you get are beings who, and there's 3 points she makes here, show a particular gift or proclivity to work with energy, what in the Star Wars series is called the Force, or what she calls the field, apprentice and train away from a householder life, and use their capacity to serve the good, right? So that's what Jedi did, right? They showed the proclivity. They had something in their blood that let them connect with the Force and have conscious engagement with it. They were then mentored from an early age so that they didn't let too much fear and conditioning go into their programming. And then they used their capacity to serve the good. But of course, in dominator archetypal culture, what do they do when they're killing bad guys and being killed by bad guys? But what she's saying here is that, yeah, but before there was that kind of dominator negative culture, they were working with the Force. And she gives some illustrations here in a little bit. So let me go on. The priestesses and priests became masterful at working with both their own energies and with the field itself. So again, energy mastery. Their communion with the field was their devotion. Because I was thinking about, okay, well, did they do like rituals to the goddess or god or anything like that? It didn't feel like that didn't resonate, but I had the question in my mind. They did not need to perform ceremonial rites to an external deity, for they recognized a more unified communion with source within themselves. Nonetheless, there were those priestesses and priests inclined toward facilitation and service, whose role it would have been to oversee ceremonial events and rites of passage for the people. So there's still a ceremonial priest or priestess role. Other roles would and could include many you would find in your civilization today, from innovators to educators to builders, healers, midwives, artists, gardeners, and mystics. So in other words, they might have like a function in society that seemed very practical within their own civilization, but they also had the power of conscious connection with the field. They were energy masters. As humans, okay, so now next part here. So that's like, way back in some other now moment. As humans became more physical and shifted away from the highest reaches of consciousness, more and more separation occurred, right? More and more of that feeling of we're separate. I can't, we're not what do you call it? Not empathic, telepathic with each other anymore. We feel more separated. While in earlier or other times, the temple or cloistered life was only required during training years, and even then, not necessarily full time. So, if any of you ever read the book Initiation by Elizabeth H., uh, she would go stay in the temple for times as she was preparing to be a priestess, but she would come home too. Um, so they weren't cloistered all the time, but uh, as what you might call the gradual falling or densification occur of humans occurred, it required a different arrangement. This is when you find temples entirely devoted to the priestess. So, in other words, people got a little too dense. You couldn't just kind of mingle if you wanted to have energy mastery. You had to cloister yourself away because the energies were too dense in the ordinary world. Um, um, Devoted to priestess in a bit more of a cloistered way. Still, energy mastery was the primary focus, with secondary mentoring for one's interests and abilities, such as teacher, midwife, gardener, builder, oracle, etc. So you had people come, priestesses and priests coming into the temple. Their primary thing is to cultivate their own energy mastery, to be one with the field or the force. But then obviously different people are different. So they might be more oracle oriented, or they might be more teacher oriented or something like that. And then they get their training there too. Such is the case with Mother Mary. And then she identifies herself. I, Mother Mary, have shared my story. I trained from an early age to prepare to carry and birth a very high frequency being. So she trained her energy mastery, and there were a number of them training to see who would be the best fit to birth, to carry and birth the Christ. The temples of my time were the last vestiges of true initiatory priestess training, and rare indeed they were by then. But in times prior, yet long after the light bodied human epoch, the earliest iterations, the priestesses lived in freedom. Some remained in the temples after their training was complete, not as cloistered nuns of your modern era, but as sovereign beings more expanded and creative and in harmony with life when among her peers. So, in other words, it's just easier sometimes for those who are very sensitive to be in the temple as things got more dense. Some eventually chose householder lives. So, in other words, priestesses were free. They weren't like the Vestal Virgins. You got to do 10 years apprentice, 10 years service, 10 years teaching. And if you have sex in between those, they dismember you with 4 horses or whatever they did. None of that stuff was going on. They were still free and sovereign women. Um, okay, so where am I? Some remained in the temples after the training was complete, again, not cloistered, but as sovereign beings. Some eventually chose householder lives, some did not. It was entirely up to each priestess. All were trained to cultivate and master their mind body vehicles to be in union with the field itself, or what we might call God. This allowed priests and priestesses alike, although we did not use such terms then, to do things you would consider impossible or even miraculous today. Even in my time, such ability, so we're talking about now 0 BC and just before that, right? During the time of the Roman domination in that part of the world. Even in my time, such abilities were rare and necessarily hidden for the threat they held to those who seized and held power via dense, brutal physical means. In other words, the Pharisees and of course the Roman Empire. So they, by the time of Mother Mary's schooling in the temples, that stuff was pretty secret. This is the mystery schools now. This is the deep mystery schools. It's not safe anymore to be out there in the world. So now she says, we draw your attention now. So now we're going back in time before the Dominator era, but not all the way back to the sort of etheric realm. Um, uh, Where did it go? Hello. Ah, we draw your attention now to the bull leapers of ancient Crete. Do you all know what that is? Let me know if you don't know, you don't know. Let me know. You don't know. Okay. So if you look at art from ancient Crete, which is the biggest island that's part of what we call Greece now in the Mediterranean, there are all these images of women and men who seem to be leaping over bulls. So it looks like the bull's running at them or they're running at the bull. They grab the horn and they do backflips over the bull and end up behind them. So this civilization was before the Trojan War, before the full domination of it was during the era of Taurus. Okay, the Taurus era. So that would be goes Taurus, Aries, Pisces, and now we've just entered Aquarius. So each of them is 2,000 years, so like 8,000 plus years ago. And it was a peaceful civilization. And if you know Greek mythology, there's the whole thing about uh, oh shoot, I forgot the bull. Anyway, it's not important. Um, you can, if I remember, I'll say it. Okay, so where are we? We draw your attention now to the bull leapers of ancient Crete. These women and men were operating from capabilities far beyond what today's human can fathom. They were in attunement with the field itself. And this includes the air, their bodies, and the bull. There was a oneness to it all, a flow and a dance. Whereas, whereas today, were a human to attempt such a feat, they would have to, first of all, be an exceptional athletic specimen. They would also have to have a very strong intuitive capacity in order to feel the bull and the timing of the leap, to grab those horns and to leap. Or maybe they'd have to drug the bull. I don't know. She didn't say that. In some sense, you could say a bit of luck would be involved. But in ancient Crete, the leaper and the bull were in conscious communication. It was, if you will, more of a dance or an acrobatic performance. And I was seeing like acrobats, up in the air and like one throws the other and then their legs are caught. They do a flip and someone else catches them and all that. It was like an acrobatic performance than a game of chance. So when we, with our eyes today, look at those images, we think, wow, they were crazy, man. They must have been, what a chance. But what she's saying is no, the consciousness was very different then. There was less separation consciousness. They were more able to connect with the bull. They were in a relationship with the bull. It was a dance. It was a performance. It was something else than what we imagine it. So we're getting close to the end here. The modern human operates with much greater limitation in consciousness and physicality due to the genetic engineering of the human species. You are literally not the same as the ancients. You could say you have had certain capacities switched off. Today, however, some of you have incarnated to prepare the way for a fully realized human to walk upon Gaia once again. Now, time is, as you know, but a construct. Those energy master priestesses of long ago are right beside you in the only here and now that there is. Yet, as you have your journey of separation in your experience, you fare best when walking through the seeming reality in which you find yourself and staying present where you are. This is not a time of cloistered priestesses or Jedi masters. This is a time of awakening and preparing your planet and the human race to become part of the galactic family. Mastering, so here's like our assignment kind of. Mastering your mind by removing the obstructions to love's presence is your primary task. This is where A Course in Miracles and other non-dual teachings come in. For only then are you able to be able enough for true mastery levels of power. So, in other words, what she's saying is until we can stop judging, blaming, hating, attacking others or self, we are not responsible enough to handle energy mastery at any other level. We're kind of like in the baby steps because we have been downgraded, and you have to take the steps to come back up and reactivate those skills and abilities. And of course, we're all at different levels, but that's essentially what they're saying. Many women feel the call, the pull to something more meaningful and more expanded and more sacred at this time. And then this is just a message for me. It's okay to meet them where they're at with goddesses. So here's some of the things that have been coming up for women who remember being priestess temples, temple priestesses. God, the goddess movement, right? Goddesses who awaken a memory within us, a desire. They awaken the expanded archetype of the divine feminine. Practices, spiritual practices, which soothe, affirm, and expand our consciousness. Soothing our consciousness, soothing our nervous system is super important because we live on planet crazy right now. And we have been downgraded and traumatized. Most of us were born into separation, have incarnations of samskara. The soothing, the calming of the nervous system in order simply to relax enough to heal is essential. So the practices that we do, from therapeutic healing, energy work to meditation, all of that, these are what we need right now. And to affirm and expand our vision, expand our energy field, expand our ability to actually become energy masters once again, or to pass that down. Um, and principles which lead us truly home. The recognition of our oneness, that when you judge another, or recently in my Course in Miracles, I was in the Circle of Atonement section. If you hold someone outside the Circle of Atonement, which is the circle of love and oneness, let's say, you put yourself out there too. And when we're out there, even if we had Jedi Master skills, we'd be fighting bad guys and being slayed by them. So it's like we really are evolving a new thing, and we can't bypass it. We have to go step by step, is what, the energy that was coming through with this part of the message. Okay, so it is okay to meet women where they're at, and to meet yourself where you're at with goddesses who awaken memory, practices which soothe, affirm, and expand, and principles which lead us truly home to the love that we truly are. I am Mary, Mother of Jesus, priestess of the Temple of Isis and Hathor, Christed child of and ambassador for the One. Ooh, ooh, that makes me cry.